Ryan Lark stepped off the transport shuttle with a sigh, his stiff muscles protesting after the long journey through space. His eyes scanned the vast expanse of the space station before him. Solara Station, a massive glittering structure floating among the stars. The station was like a small city in orbit, its many levels filled with a variety of alien species working together to maintain peace in the galaxy. Ryan had been assigned here as an engineer, responsible for fixing systems, maintaining power, grids, and handling emergency repairs. It was a job he had looked forward to, but the thought of living on the station made him nervous. The idea of sharing a room with a stranger, especially an alien, was not something he had anticipated. The shuttle doors hissed closed behind him as he grabbed his small bag and stepped onto the landing platform. Solara Station was nothing like the quiet, empty spaces he had grown used to during his travels. The station bustled with activity, alien species of all shapes and sizes moving in every direction. Ryan couldn't help but marvel at the diversity of the creatures around him. Some were humanoid, others less so, with features that made Ryan's mind work overtime trying to understand their biology. Yet, there was something strangely peaceful about the whole environment. It was clear that every species here had one common goal: to keep the peace. As Ryan moved through the busy corridors of the station, he couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The sleek, clean design of the station gave it a sterile feeling, and the constant hum of machinery only added to the sense of unease. He tried to push the feeling aside. This was his new home, at least for the time being. He was here to work, and he needed to focus on that. Soon, he found himself standing before a station officer who handed him a small device. "Your room assignment," the officer said curtly, his voice flat. "Apologies for the arrangement. Due to limited space, we had to pair you with an alien roommate. Her name is Selka. Follow the rules and you should be fine." Ryan frowned as he took the device. Selka? An alien roommate? He didn't know much about the species that lived on Solara Station, but he wasn't sure what to expect from someone who wasn't human. "Are you serious? No other options?" Ryan asked, his voice laced with frustration. The officer gave a shrug. "Rules are rules. Selka is an axillary, a species known for being strict about boundaries. Just follow them and you'll get along fine." Ryan raised an eyebrow, intrigued but skeptical. "What kind of boundaries?" he asked. "No physical contact, no crossing boundaries. Literally and figuratively," the officer replied. "They are very particular about space. Selka will be a good roommate as long as you respect her rules. Just remember one thing. No romantic involvement. Do not sleep too close." Ryan blinked. "Seriously? Is that a real rule?" The officer gave him a quick look as if he should already know the answer. "It is. Their biology is sensitive, and they don't like unpredictability. Follow the rules, and you'll be fine." Confused, and a little uncomfortable with the situation, Ryan nodded. "Yeah, sure, no problem." With that, the officer turned and walked away, leaving Ryan standing in the hallway with his new room assignment. He stared at the device in his hand for a moment, wondering what kind of strange situation he had just signed up for. He had been to plenty of places in his career, but nothing quite like this. Living with an alien wasn't exactly what he had expected when he signed up for this job. As he made his way to his new quarters, Ryan couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. The bright lights of the station's corridors made everything seem more artificial, as if nothing was real. But there was no turning back now. He had a job to do. Finally, he reached the door to his room. It slid open with a soft hiss, revealing a small, clean space. At the center of the room, there was a large bed with a thin, glowing line running down the middle of it. On one side, a figure sat cross-legged, her glowing blue markings faintly pulsing in the dim light. Ryan took a deep breath and walked inside. "Hey, you must be Selka," he said, trying to keep his tone light. The alien girl looked up, her silver eyes sharp and unreadable. "You are human," she said, her voice smooth but emotionless. Ryan scratched the back of his head. Yeah, and you must be my new roommate." Selka gave a single nod. "I am Selka of Axillari," she said, her voice still flat. She gestured to the glowing line on the bed. This is the boundary. Do not cross it. Ryan let out a small chuckle, trying to ease the tension. Wow, strict much? Selka didn't respond, her gaze fixed on him. Your kind is unpredictable, she said calmly. The rule exists for a reason. Ryan sighed and dropped his bag near the small storage unit. Look, I'm not planning to bother you, all right? Let's just stay out of each other's way. Selka nodded in agreement, though she didn't seem to show much emotion. That is the ideal situation. Ryan sat down on his side of the bed, bouncing slightly to test its softness. By the way, he asked, why is there only one bed? Selka barely glanced at him. Space station efficiency, she said. They assume we can follow the rules. Ryan rolled his eyes. Great. First time living with an alien and I already feel like I'm on trial. Selka ignored him and returned to her reading. A floating holographic screen filled with strange symbols. Ryan lay back and stared at the ceiling. This was going to be a long assignment. He couldn't help but wonder what he had gotten himself to, sir. The days following Ryan's arrival at Solera Station were nothing short of strange. The awkwardness of sharing a room with Selka hung thick in the air, like an invisible wall neither of them dared to cross. At first, Ryan tried to stick to his own side of the room, hoping to avoid making things even more uncomfortable than they already were. But it wasn't easy. He was used to being around people, joking with his colleagues, and being a little messy. Here, in Selka's presence, every action felt out of place. She was always calm, precise, and never let the smallest detail slip by her. Ryan, on the other hand, wasn't exactly known for his attention to detail. Every morning, Ryan found himself rolling out of bed with a sense of dread. The first few days were quiet, almost painfully so. Selka never spoke unless absolutely necessary, and when she did, her words were always clipped, logical, and devoid of emotion. Ryan, on the other hand, found himself humming tunes as he worked. On the station's various engineering systems, the sound of his voice filling the otherwise quiet room. He would leave tools scattered around the room without a second thought, a stark contrast to Selka's methodical way of keeping everything in perfect order. The way she folded her clothes and organized her belongings was almost unsettling. She didn't seem to relax, ever. One day, as Ryan was tinkering with the station's power grid, he found himself thinking about Selka more than he would like to admit. There was something about her that intrigued him, despite how distant she was. Her glowing markings like constellations on her skin pulsed gently whenever she was in deep thought. Ryan couldn't help but wonder what was going on inside her head. Selka never seemed like the type to open up, and that only made her all the more mysterious. When Ryan returned to the room that evening, he found it as silent as always. He tossed his bag onto the floor near his bed and began to remove his jacket. Selka was sitting on her side of the room, her holographic screen in front of her, filled with alien symbols he couldn't read. Ryan had never been one for small talk, but he figured it couldn't hurt to try. So, you ever go out? I mean, for fun or anything? He asked half-heartedly. Selka didn't even glance at him. I do not engage in unnecessary activities, she said, her voice unwavering. Efficiency is important. Ryan snorted, sitting down on his side of the bed. Yeah, I kind of guessed that already. He picked up a tool he'd left on the floor and began fiddling with it. What's the deal with you anyway? I mean, all this perfection. It's like you're a robot or something. Selka turned her head slightly, her silver eyes locking onto his. I am not a robot human. I am axillary. Our species value order and structure. We do not waste time on unnecessary distractions. She paused for a moment, almost as if considering something. You, however, do. You leave tools scattered, you speak without purpose, and you act without regard for efficiency. Ryan's brow furrowed at her words. Look, not everything needs to be perfectly efficient. Sometimes it's okay to let loose a little. It's not all about work and order. You're allowed to relax. Selka remained silent for a long while, her glowing markings pulsing faintly. Finally, she replied, Relaxation is a waste of time. It does not contribute to our goal. Ryan shook his head in disbelief. You really don't get it, do you? People need time to just be. Without structure, without deadlines. It's what makes life worth living. Selka did not respond. She simply went back to her holographic screen, seemingly uninterested in continuing the conversation. Ryan, though frustrated, let it go. He wasn't sure why he even bothered trying, but he couldn't help it. There was something about her cold, logical demeanor that both irritated and fascinated him. As the days passed, Ryan began to notice little things that began to change, though he wasn't sure whether he was imagining them or not. For one, Selka would occasionally glance at him when he hummed, her silver eyes following the sound like she was analyzing it. She never spoke about it, but Ryan could tell that she was aware of the music he played. Another oddity was how she would sometimes adjust the temperature of the room when he entered, making it slightly warmer, as though she had noticed he was uncomfortable with the cold. Ryan never asked her about it, but it was strange. It was as if she was trying, in her own way, to accommodate him. One evening, after a long shift, Ryan came back to the room feeling particularly exhausted. The station had been dealing with an overload in one of its main power grids, and Ryan had spent the last few hours fixing malfunctioning circuits. His muscles ached, and he was starving. When he walked in, he found Selka sitting as usual, cross-legged, on her bed, her glowing markings pulsing in a steady rhythm. He dropped his bag and went to the small storage unit to grab a snack. Hey, Selka, he said, trying to break the silence. You, ever eat anything for fun? I mean, we can't just work all the time. Selka raised an eyebrow, though her face remained expressionless. Eating is for sustenance, not for enjoyment. Ryan couldn't help but chuckle. You really don't know how to relax, do you? She stared at him for a moment, her gaze unyielding. Relaxation is irrelevant. Efficiency is everything. Ryan shook his head, a small smile tugging at the corner of his lips. Maybe you're right, but sometimes you need to just live a little. He leaned back on his bed, letting out a long sigh. I guess we're just two different kinds of people, huh? Selka didn't reply. She simply returned to her screen, as always, as if his words had meant nothing, but Ryan could feel the tension between them, a growing sense of understanding that despite their differences they were in this together. Though they continued to follow their respective routines, Selka with her strict order, and Ryan with his disorganized, carefree approach, there was a shift in the air between them. It wasn't much, but it was something. Perhaps, Ryan thought, this strange arrangement might not be so bad after all. The hum of Solaris Station was constant, a comforting reminder that everything was running as it should. But that tranquility was about to be shattered. Ryan was at his workbench fiddling with a circuit board when the deep, resonant tone of the station's emergency alarm blared throughout the hallways. His heart skipped a beat as he stood up quickly, looking around for a sign of what was happening. The alarms continued, and a deep, mechanical voice filled the air. Warning. Power failure detected. Temperature control offline. All personnel report to their designated stations immediately. Ryan's mind raced as he grabbed his communicator, his fingers moving quickly over the device. Control, this is Ryan Lark. What's going on? A crackling voice came through the comms. We're seeing a massive failure in the station's main power grid. The backup generators are struggling. It'll take hours to fix. We've also lost temperature control. The entire station is cooling rapidly. We need engineers on the ground to stabilize the systems. Immediately. Ryan cursed under his breath. He knew what that meant. The temperature on the station could drop fast, and if the power wasn't restored soon, the living quarters would become unbearable. Worse, the cold could be dangerous. He didn't have time to waste. With a grim expression, Ryan gathered his tools and rushed toward the station's maintenance tunnel. The corridors were buzzing with activity as crew members ran in every direction. The stakes were high, but Ryan focused solely on the task at hand. He had handled power failures before, but this one felt different. The cold wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a threat to everyone on board, and it was spreading fast. When he reached the maintenance tunnel, Ryan was met by his colleague Jace, a fellow engineer, who looked as stressed as he felt. Good. To see you, man. We've got a real mess here, Jace said, wiping sweat from his forehead. Power's fluctuating. It's going to be a long night. Ryan nodded, his mind racing as he examined the power relay. The main circuit was fried, but there was still a chance they could salvage it. With quick and practiced movements, he began to work, his mind completely absorbed in the task. The faint hum of machinery around him became white noise as he twisted wires and adjusted terminals. He had done this 100 times before, but today the stakes were higher. Outside the maintenance room, the temperature continued to drop. The station's artificial heat was failing, and Ryan could already feel the bite of the cold creeping into the hallways. The cold was something he could handle. Humans had evolved to withstand chilly environments, but the Axillary, like Selka, were a different matter. They weren't built for cold. Ryan's thoughts immediately turned to her. What was she doing right now? How was she dealing with the temperature drop? She had never shown any signs of discomfort, but he had noticed her subtle adjustments to the temperature when he entered the room. Was she already preparing for the worst? The station's comms crackled, pulling him from his thoughts. Control to all engineers. Temperature is dropping rapidly in all sections of the station. We estimate the environmental control systems will be offline for at least an hour. Please be advised that the cold is becoming dangerous. Priority is to restore power immediately. Repeat, restore power immediately. Ryan felt the weight of those words settle in his chest. Time was running out. After what felt like an eternity, Ryan finally managed to stabilize the power relay. He exhaled a sigh of relief, his body drenched in sweat. I've got it. Power's back up, he said into his communicator. But the temperature, it's still going to take a while to fix. We know, came the response. We'll send backup engineers, just stay safe. Ryan disconnected the call and looked at Jace. We've done all we can. Let's get back to the room before it gets worse. As they made their way back toward their quarters, Ryan's thoughts were once again pulled to Selka. He was sure she would be feeling the cold by now. His mind wandered as he thought about their awkward coexistence, but now with the temperature continuing to fall, there was no avoiding the problem. He couldn't ignore the growing concern he had for her. When Ryan finally reached their quarters, he was greeted by a blast of icy air that made him shiver despite his thick jacket. The artificial heating had failed completely, and the room was unbearably cold. His breath came out in visible puffs as he stepped inside. There, standing in the center of the room, was Selka, as still as ever, her glowing blue markings flickering softly against the cold. Selka, Ryan said, his voice low, a little uncertain. It's freezing in here. You all right? She didn't move for a moment, but then she spoke, her voice calm and measured as always. The temperature is dropping rapidly. I am not worried. We are Axillary. We are built for harsh conditions. Her silver eyes met his, and for the first time Ryan saw something other than her usual cold demeanor. Was it worry? Ryan shook his head. I don't know how you're not freezing right now, but I can't stay here like this. We need to figure something out. Selka's glowing markings flickered again, and she crossed her arms, her expression unreadable. You are human. Your biology will not withstand the cold for long. I suggest we find a solution. Ryan was about to argue, but then he realized what that meant. If things didn't change soon, they would both be in serious trouble. Selka's species might be adapted to cold, but that didn't mean she could survive indefinitely in these conditions without assistance. And if the station's power systems didn't stabilize soon, they were all in serious jeopardy. After a few moments of uncomfortable silence, Selka spoke again, her voice flat, but with a strange hint of concern. There is a solution, she said. It would require shared body heat to maintain warmth until the temperature is restored. Ryan blinked in surprise. Wait, are you saying we should? Selka's expression remained stoic. Yes, it is a logical solution. We cannot afford to freeze. Ryan's mind raced. The last thing he wanted was to cross that line, but the cold was becoming unbearable. The warmth of another person was an immediate necessity. Still, Selka's rule, no romantic involvement, no closeness, seemed impossible to follow in a situation like this. Yet if they were to survive, they had no other choice. Ryan exhaled slowly, his breath clouding in the cold air. Okay, but just until it gets fixed. We keep it professional. Selka nodded, her silver eyes never leaving his. Agreed. As they carefully arranged themselves on the bed, staying on opposite sides for now, the cold began to creep into Ryan's bones. Despite the distance between them, Selka's warm presence was undeniable, and for the first time since arriving on the station, Ryan realized that perhaps this wouldn't be as easy as he thought. The line they had drawn between them, the boundary, was starting to blur, and Ryan couldn't help but wonder if the situation they were in would change things forever. As the temperature slowly stabilized, the days that followed felt strangely tense. Ryan and Selka remained in their shared quarters, both keeping to their routines, but something had shifted. The air between them had changed in subtle, almost imperceptible ways. Every time Ryan glanced at Selka, there was a flicker of something deeper behind her normally emotionless silver eyes. But neither of them spoke of it. Neither of them acknowledged the strange closeness that had developed between them during that shared moment of warmth. The silence between them grew comfortable yet heavy, like the space they were sharing was somehow filled with the weight of unspoken words. Ryan, always the one to crack jokes or hum to himself, found that his usual lightheartedness felt out of place. He no longer hummed as he worked, and even his small, casual remarks seemed to disappear. Instead, he focused intently on his work, trying to ignore the feeling that Selka's presence was somehow occupying more of his thoughts than it should. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day spent repairing faulty systems, Ryan entered, their quarters half distracted by the weight of the day's events. The air was cool, but the temperature had finally stabilized, and the room no longer felt unbearable. He tossed his jacket onto the chair near the desk and slumped onto his bed with a sigh. Selka sat cross-legged as usual, her glowing blue markings faintly pulsing in the dim light. She was holding a small holographic screen in her hands, scanning through the various alien languages and symbols that Ryan couldn't even begin to decipher. Her stillness was almost unnerving, as it always had been. She had not moved a muscle since he entered, not even acknowledging him with her usual sharp gaze. Ryan took a deep breath. He was done with pretending. The silence was killing him. "Hey, Selka," he started, his voice rough with exhaustion. "Can we talk?" Selka didn't look up, but her voice came out evenly. "We are talking." "No, I mean, really talk," Ryan pressed, sitting up. "It's just, this whole situation. It's weird, right?" She blinked slowly, and for a moment Ryan thought she might actually engage with him. But instead she simply replied, "It is a logical arrangement. We follow the rules. There is no need for unnecessary complications." Ryan couldn't help but laugh, though it lacked its usual humor. "Yeah, I've heard that before, but the thing is, I don't think it's working. We're living in the same space, we're getting along fine, but there's this wall between us. And I'm not just talking about the glowing line on the bed." He watched her closely, waiting for a response, but there was none. Selka's gaze remained fixed on the screen in front of her, her posture as perfect as always. A wave of frustration washed over Ryan. She was so damn controlled, so stiff in every way, while he felt like he was barely hanging on. This couldn't continue. The tension had to be addressed, or it would drive him crazy. "Listen," he said, running a hand through his messy hair. "I get it. You're different. You follow rules. You do things a certain way. But I'm not a robot, Selka. I don't follow instructions like that. I'm human. I've got flaws, and I don't expect everything to be perfect. But pretending like this, pretending like we're just roommates, isn't working anymore. We're not strangers anymore, are we?" At last, Selka looked up, her silver eyes locking onto his with a quiet intensity. "We are not strangers," she admitted in a soft tone that was almost uncharacteristic for her. "But it does not change our arrangement. Rules exist for a reason, Ryan." Ryan let out a bitter chuckle. "I know. You've said that enough times, but You're not even letting yourself feel anything. You're not allowing yourself to get past the rules. Selka's eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of emotion breaking through her controlled expression. My people do not allow emotion to cloud logic. There is no room for distractions. Yeah, well, that's your problem, Ryan shot back, his voice growing louder. You can't just shut off everything that doesn't fit your perfect little world. I know you're not a machine, Selka. I've seen it. I've seen the way you adjust the room temperature when I come in, the way you glance at me when I hum, like you're trying to understand it. You're not as detached as you want to believe, and it's okay. You can let go of the rules. You're allowed to feel something. There was a long, almost painful silence between them. Ryan could feel his heart pounding in his chest, the weight of his words hanging in the air like a thick fog. He didn't know what he expected from her. He wasn't even sure if he should be saying all of this, but he couldn't keep pretending anymore. To his surprise, Selka stood up slowly, her movements precise, as always. She didn't speak at first, but she walked over to the edge of his bed, her eyes never leaving his. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer than usual. I do not know how to process what you are saying, Ryan. I have spent my entire life living by logic, by the rules. I have never felt the need to question them. Ryan stood up too, his gaze meeting hers. Maybe it's time you start questioning. For the first time, Selka seemed uncertain. She took a small step closer, and Ryan could see the faintest tremor in her glowing markings. Her usual calm facade was beginning to crack. The distance between them, once so unbridgeable, was shrinking. I cannot ignore the rules forever, she said, her voice quieter now. They have kept me safe. They have kept us safe. Ryan swallowed hard, his chest tight with emotion. But safety isn't everything. It's living, Selka. It's about the moments we have, the connections we make. I'm not saying we should throw all the rules away, but maybe we can break a few. Together. For a long moment, Selka just stood there, silent, her silver eyes searching his face. Finally, she spoke, though her words were barely above a whisper. I am trying to understand you, Ryan, but it is difficult. This feeling, it is not something I am used to. Ryan reached out, his hand hovering just inches from hers. It's okay to not have all the answers. We don't have to figure everything out right now, but we can start by not following the rules for a minute. Selka looked down at his hand, then back up into his eyes. Slowly, cautiously, she reached out and placed her hand in his. And in that quiet moment, Ryan realized something. They were both stepping into unknown territory, breaking the rules they had set for themselves, but it didn't feel wrong. It felt like the first step toward something more, something neither of them fully understood yet, but both were willing to explore. For the first time since arriving at Solara Station, Ryan felt like he wasn't just surviving in the same space as Selka. He was starting to live in it, alive, in a way that broke every boundary they had been so careful to maintain. Maybe, he said softly. This is how we start. And as their hands remained entwined, the tension that had filled their room for so long seemed to dissipate. Neither of them knew where it would go from here, but one thing was clear. They had just crossed the first line, and neither of them was about to turn back. The days after that night were different. The tension that had once consumed the small space they shared on Solara Station seemed to dissipate, though neither Ryan nor Selka openly acknowledged the change. Instead, it lingered quietly in the background, an unspoken understanding between them. They both continued their routines, Ryan with his usual mix of laid-back disorganization, Selka with her perfect precision. But now there was an awareness between them that hadn't existed before. The lines they had drawn, the rules they had clung to so desperately, were beginning to blur, and neither of them seemed to know how to handle it. Ryan found himself glancing at Selka more often than he cared to admit. He had always admired her, focus and discipline, but now there was something else there. Something softer, more human. It was in the way she would adjust the temperature of the room just slightly when he entered, or the way her silver eyes would linger on him for a moment longer than necessary before she returned to her work. She was starting to let her guard down, little by little, and Ryan wasn't sure if that made him nervous or relieved. One evening, as they sat in their quarters after another long day of work, Ryan couldn't help but break the silence. He had spent the entire day trying to focus on fixing the station's power grid, but his mind kept wandering back to Selka. He had to know. "Selka," he said, his voice low but steady. "Are you okay? I mean, you've been acting different lately." Selka was sitting on her side of the room as usual, her holographic screen floating in front of her. But this time when Ryan spoke, she didn't immediately turn her attention to it. Instead, she paused, her silver eyes flicking toward him for a brief moment before she responded. "I am functioning as expected," she said, her voice calm and controlled. But there was a hint of something beneath it, a vulnerability that Ryan had never heard before. "However, I am processing changes. My logic has always been my guide, but you make me question things." Ryan was surprised by her honesty. Selka, who had always been so composed, was admitting something he hadn't expected. She was trying to understand her feelings, something that seemed impossible for someone as structured as her. "I don't know what I'm doing, Selka," Ryan admitted, his voice softer now. "I don't know how this works, what we're doing, but I can't ignore the fact that something's changed between us, and I can't pretend like it's not there." Selka didn't respond right away, but Ryan could see the conflict in her eyes. It was subtle, but it was there, an internal struggle between her rigid sense of logic and the emotions she had been trying to suppress for so long. "You do not understand," Selka finally said, her voice quiet. "This is not how we Axillari are supposed to operate. We do not allow personal connections to interfere with our missions, with our purpose." She paused, as though the words were difficult to say. "But with you, Ryan, it feels different. I cannot explain it." Ryan stood up slowly and walked over to her side of the room. He didn't know what he was expecting, but something about Selka's admission made his chest tighten. He had always known she was more than just a rigid, rule-following machine. But hearing her struggle with the same feelings he had been wrestling with made everything feel more real. "You don't have to explain it," Ryan said gently, sitting down beside her. "We're both figuring this out, and I don't have all the answers. But I know one thing. I don't want to hide from it anymore. I don't want to pretend that we're just going through the motions." Selka turned to him then, her silver eyes locking onto his with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. "I am not good at this," she said softly, almost as if she were speaking more to herself than to him. "But perhaps I can learn." Ryan smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. He reached out, carefully taking her hand in his. Her markings flickered briefly at the touch, but she didn't pull away. Instead, she squeezed his hand lightly, her fingers cool against his skin. It was a small gesture, but it meant more than any words could convey. "Maybe we both have a lot to learn," Ryan said, his voice low, "but I think we're better off learning together." The moments that followed felt like a turning point. Neither of them said much after that, but the silence was no longer uncomfortable. It wasn't filled with the weight of unspoken words. It was filled with understanding. They didn't need to rush to figure everything out, but the connection between them was undeniable. And for the first time since they met, Ryan felt a sense of peace about it. The next few days passed in a quiet, almost surreal rhythm. Ryan and Selka continued their work on the station, but their interactions were different now. There was an ease between them that hadn't been there before. They still kept to their separate routines, Selka maintaining her perfect discipline, and Ryan still leaving tools scattered around. But there was an unspoken agreement that they were in this together, and that made all the difference. But just as Ryan began to feel like maybe this could work, like maybe they could make this strange, awkward situation work, something happened that neither of them had anticipated. It started with a routine check of the station's external sensors. Ryan was assigned to inspect some of the outer panels that had been damaged in the recent storm, and Selka was busy working on the security systems. The work was boring, tedious, and something Ryan could do with his eyes closed. He had no idea, however, that it would be this seemingly innocuous task that would change everything. As he worked outside the station, repairing the cracked panels, and checking for any signs of damage, he noticed something strange. His oxygen levels, which had been perfectly fine earlier, started to drop. At first, he assumed it was a glitch in his suit's readings, but as the warning flashed in his helmet's HUD, panic started to set in. Oxygen levels dropping. Ryan muttered under his breath, his voice tinged with concern. "Control, I'm getting an oxygen warning. Running diagnostics now." "Copy that, Ryan," came the response from the control room. "Looks like a minor glitch. You're good, just keep working." Ryan didn't trust it. He ran another diagnostic, but this time the readings were worse. His oxygen levels continued to plummet. 40%, 30%, 20%. "Control, this is Ryan Lark. I'm experiencing a serious issue with my oxygen supply. It's not a glitch. I need to get back inside, now." "Copy that. We're seeing it. Get to the airlock immediately." Ryan's heart raced. The oxygen levels continued to drop, and he knew he didn't have much time. His breath became shallow, his vision blurred. He pushed himself as fast as he could toward the nearest airlock, but it felt like every step took a lifetime. Then, as if from nowhere, Selka's voice cut through the crackling comms. "Ryan, you need to move faster." Ryan's hand shook as he tried to respond, but his strength was fading fast. He was so close to the airlock, but it was taking everything in him just to keep going. A second later, the airlock doors slid open. The moment Ryan stepped inside, the oxygen levels returned to normal. He collapsed onto the floor, gasping for breath. His suit's life support system kicked in, pumping oxygen back into his lungs, but everything felt surreal. The last thing Ryan saw before his vision faded was Selka's face on the station screen. Her silver eyes were wide with fear, and for the first time since they met, Ryan saw something in her that he hadn't expected. Genuine concern. And in that moment, Ryan knew. The rules were already broken. The distance between them had been erased, and nothing would ever be the same again. When Ryan finally woke up back in their quarters, Selka was there, standing by his bed. Her usual calmness was gone, replaced with a rare expression of unease. Ryan tried to sit up, his head still, fuzzy. "You almost died," she said, her voice quieter than usual. Ryan blinked, still trying to process what had happened. "Yeah, I guess I did." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, Ryan saw the full weight of her emotions. Selka had felt the fear of losing him, and in that moment he realized that everything between them had changed for good. There was no going back. They had crossed the line, and now they had to face whatever came next, together.